We come to you again today with another message on God's plan for man. We've been studying the pre-Adamite world the last few lessons, and now we come to the story of the recreation in Lesson 8 of this 52-lesson Bible course. Now, the story of recreation, not the story of original creation. We see in Genesis 1:1 that God created originally the heavens and the earth in the beginning. But since that time now, there has been a rule of Lucifer on the earth, and a period of perfection, and a rebellion of Lucifer and the pre-Adamites, and then the curse upon that first world, and the first flood on the earth as recorded in the Bible in Genesis 1:2. All that now before the story of recreation, as you'll notice illustrated on the third ball of your chart. There you have the 6 days of the restoration of the earth from that chaotic state to a second habitable state in the days of Adam, or what we call the present earth. You'll notice down below each of those balls there is the name of the particular period, and up at the top there is the particular time element in connection with it. We call that period the present earth, the 6 days of the restoration. In this lesson, we shall study the story of the end of chaos on the earth and the beginning of the restoration of it to its second perfect state. That is, the work of the 6 days and the beginning of the heavens and the earth, which are now. The biblical proof for this we have already given you. Thus, questions concerning the original creation of the heavens and the earth before the flood of Genesis 1:2, and the pre-Adamite world, and the chaotic period, and the source of the demons, and the age of the universe, the location of Lucifer's kingdom, and the cause of his fall, the cause of sin on earth, and many other questions, we fully answered them already in connection with the pre-Adamite world. Now, the main points of the story of the recreation are the 6 days' work of Genesis 1:2 through 1:3 through 2:25. Are they literal days or not? That the 6 days of Genesis 1 were literal 24-hour days, as we know them, is very clear. The word evening is from the Hebrew word ered, meaning dusk, evening, or night. It is translated evening 49 times, but it is not once used in a figurative sense. The word morning is found a number of times. In fact, it is translated 187 times, and not once in a figurative sense. So when we read in these days, evening and morning, we must take them to be literally days as we know them, divided by light and darkness. This shows that the words day and night and light and darkness are literal days and literal nights, and are regular periods of light and darkness regulated by the sun, moon, and stars mentioned elsewhere in Scripture. There is no hint in Scripture anywhere that day and night ever did or ever will come from a different source than from the sun, moon, and stars that were created before the earth was created, as we have already seen. It is true that the word day, which is used 2,182 times of a literal day, may refer to a prolonged period, when it is qualified as the day of the Lord or the day of God and so on. However, when it is used with qualifying words, beginning or ending the day, such as evening and morning, it can only be understood in the literal sense. It is further proved to be literal by numbering each day as first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on, as one naturally would number literal days when speaking of any 7 days which one wishes to mention. No symbolic period is ever numbered in Scripture. It is definitely stated in Exodus 20 verses 8 to 11 and 31 verses 14 to 17 that God made, not created, the heavens, the firmament, not the heavens where God dwells, and the earth in 6 days. Man was told to work the same length of time that it took to do the work of Genesis 1:3 through 2:25. 6 days shalt thou labor, for in 6 days God made heaven and earth. It is just as logical to argue that man was supposed to work 6,000 years or 6 indefinite periods of time before resting as to argue this about the 6 days' work of Genesis 1. If the 6 days of Genesis 1 can be proved to be periods of 1,000 or more years each, then it can also be proved that the 6 days of Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11 are the same length, for exactly the same words are used in each case referring to the same kind of days. It cannot be that mere personal interpretation of the same words to prove two different ideas could be a basis of proof that literal days are used in one case and not in the other. It is never argued that the 6 days of Exodus 20 are long periods of time, and yet they do not have as clear qualifying words like evening and morning, first, second, third, as the days of Genesis 1 do. Therefore, from the standpoint of literal language and common sense, it can be seen that the days of recreation are as literal as the work days for man. Everyone knows that the work days for man could not be indefinite periods, for days in Moses' time were as long as days now, and so it is with the days of the recreation in Adam's time. From where then could one get the idea that the days of Genesis are not ordinary days? Such an idea could not come from the plain language of Scripture, and so we must reject this idea. Remember, our fundamental principle of true Bible interpretation is like that of any other book. Take the Bible literally wherein it is at all possible. When the language cannot be literal, or when language states to the contrary, then the passage is figurative. On this basis, we have to take the days in Genesis as literal. Could not God do this work in 6 literal days as well as in 6,000 years or 6 indefinite periods? If he can, and if this is stated in the Bible, then let it alone and do not change it. If the idea is advanced that the days of Genesis could not be literal because the sun, moon, and stars had not yet been created to regulate days and nights, we reply that they had been created originally in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, as in Genesis 1:1, Job 38:4-7. For we have a statement that the stars and the sons of God were shouting and singing when God laid the foundations of the earth, proving that the sun, moon, and stars were created before the earth. If the earth was in existence before day 1, as is clear in Genesis 1:2, for there we read the earth was under water and under darkness. And if the heavens were created before the earth, as in Job 38:4-7, then the sun, moon, and stars were also in existence before day 1. If this is true, then the light of the first 3 days came from the same source that it has come from every day since. There had been days and nights all through Lucifer's reign, but not through the total darkness of chaos while the earth was cursed and the lights had been withheld from it, as recorded in Genesis 1:2 and Jeremiah 4:23-26. The work of day 1 was simply the restoration of day and night as it had been on earth when Lucifer ruled. The 1,000-year day theory is ridiculous in the light of facts. If this theory be true, then it took God a long time to do the work of these 6 days, and it took a much longer time originally to create all things, which we have discussed before in connection with the original creation of all things. Also, if this theory be true, then the waters remained on the earth at least 1,000 years before they were divided. The earth was still desolate another 1,000 years before vegetation was planted, and vegetation was on earth 1,000 years before the sun, moon, and stars were created, if, as supposed, they were created on the 4th day. Here the question arises, how could vegetation live so long without the sun? Further, vegetation was here about 2,000 years before animal life was on the earth, so the earth must have been a dense forest for 2,000 years. Fish and fowls were 1,000 years before man on the earth, and other land animals were before the creation of the woman. Then, too, we would have to conclude that it took God 1,000 years to create fish and fowls, and another 1,000 years to create land animals and man. But according to Genesis 2, verses 7-25, man was created before the animals, and animals were created before the woman, or between the creation of Adam and Eve. Adam was created at the beginning of this day and the woman at the end of this day. If this day was 1,000 years long, then man was 1,000 years old when a wife was made for him. God had rested another 1,000 years between the making of Eve and the fall of man, so there were 2,000 years from Adam's creation to the beginning of the sixth 1,000 years, and the fall of man after the seventh 1,000 years. And yet Adam was only 130 years old when Seth was born, according to Genesis 5:1-3. How foolish are the theories of man when examined in the light of common sense and the Scriptures. We conclude, therefore, that the 6 days of Genesis were literal 24-hour days, as is plainly evident by the facts themselves, and that they were not periods of 1,000 or more years each. It is true that some translations read age for day, but this is incorrect. Even if an age is meant, we have seen in Lesson 1 that an age is any period of time, whether long or short. A literal day is an age, a short one, and since day is limited and qualified as a literal one in Genesis 1 as evening and morning, it will not be wrong to believe literal days are meant. This is the only theory that will harmonize with all the facts and Scriptures on the subject. So we have to be sensible with the Bible and conclude that the 6 days' work of Genesis 1:3-2:25 are the work of the restoration of the earth from the first flooded state and from the first curse on the earth to a second habitable state in the days of Adam, and the making of new life, fish and fowls and land animals and man, to take the place of the pre-Adamite life that lived before the days of Adam.